A scream ripped through the dust of Copper Creek. It wasn't a sound you got used to, not even out here. It cut right through the lazy drone of flies and the clop of horse hooves. "Someone help! He can't breathe!" The cry came from Wilkins' General Store. I was across the street in the clinic, arranging bottles of laudanum on a shelf, and the sound froze me solid. My fingers tightened on the dark glass. Through the window, I saw people gathering, a nervous crowd, shuffling their feet, not wanting to get too close to trouble. Inside the store, a man was on the floor. I knew who it was, even from a distance. Mr. Jameson, a big man, a rancher, now turning a horrible shade of purple. His hand was clawed at his chest, like he was trying to rip out his own heart. I'd seen this before, in my father's books, in the quiet moments with Doc Lawrence. It was a heart seizure. A voice in my head, a voice that sounded a lot like my father, screamed at me, "Go! You know what to do." But my feet were lead. My boots felt nailed to the floorboards. 3 years. For 3 years, I'd been Doc Lawrence's assistant. 3 years of sweeping floors, cleaning instruments, and reading every single medical text he owned by the flicker of a lamp when he was asleep. 3 years of seeing things, understanding things, and keeping my mouth shut. The bottle in my hand trembled. Mr. Jameson. He'd tipped his hat to me just this morning. Last week, he'd told Doc Lawrence his arm was aching, a deep, persistent pain. Doc had called it rheumatism. I knew it wasn't rheumatism. I saw the signs then, too. The slight shortness of breath, the sweat on his brow when it wasn't hot. But I hadn't said a word. And now he was dying on the floor of the general store. Before I knew what I was doing, I'd set the bottle down. My feet were moving, carrying me across the dusty street, my skirts clutched in my fists. The crowd parted for me, their whispers following me like shadows. It's the doctor's girl. Just sweeps the floors is all. Strange, quiet thing. I ignored them. I knelt beside Mr. Jameson. My hands, shaking so badly I could barely control them, reached for his wrist. His pulse was a frantic flutter, a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. It was fading. Suddenly, a figure loomed over me. Mrs. Jameson. Her face was a mess of terror and rage. "What do you think you're doing?" she screeched. "Don't you touch him!" I opened my mouth to explain, to tell her about the foxglove tincture that could strengthen his heart, the cool compresses to ease the pressure. The words were there, right on the tip of my tongue. But they wouldn't come out. My throat closed up tight, the way it always did when people were watching. "Get away from him!" she screamed, shoving me hard. I stumbled backward, landing in the dust, my cheeks burned with shame. "She's just the girl who sweeps the clinic. She's not a doctor." I watched, helpless, as Mr. Jameson's chest gave one last shuddering heave. And then he was still. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. The dusky blue of his lips was the color of a twilight sky just before it goes completely black. He was the third one, the third person in this town I had silently diagnosed, the third person I had watched die because I was too afraid to speak. By the time Doc Lawrence rode back from the Sullivan Ranch at sundown, it was too late. The town undertaker had already taken Mr. Jameson's body away. That night, the clinic was quiet. After I'd cleaned the last instrument and swept the last speck of dust from the floor, I sat on my small cot in the back room. This tiny, windowless space had been my home for 3 years. My only real possession lay in my lap. A worn leather journal, my father's medical diary. The pages fell open to a passage I knew by heart. The ink was faded, but the words were burned into my mind. A physician's first duty is to observe. The second is to interpret. The third, and perhaps most sacred, is to speak the truth of what one has seen, regardless of whether others wish to hear it. My father, Dr. Thomas Winters, had lived by those words. They were the very words that had destroyed him. He spoke the truth, a truth that contradicted a more powerful doctor, a truth that cost him his reputation, his practice, and in the end, his life. I traced his signature with my finger. We were nothing alike. He was brave. I was a coward. He was a ghost now, and I was just a shadow, haunting the edges of a world I was born to be a part of. I blew out the lamp, but sleep wouldn't come. In the darkness, I could still see Mr. Jameson's face. I could still hear his wife's words. She's just the girl who sweeps the clinic. The words hurt because they were true. That's all I was, all I had allowed myself to become. But something broke in me that night. Lying in the dark, I made a promise to the memory of my father and to the ghost of Mr. Jameson. Never again. Never again would I stay silent. 2 weeks later, the Arizona sun was a hammer beating down on the anvil of Copper Creek. I was sweeping the clinic's porch, the heat so thick it felt like I was wading through water. That's when I heard it. The sound of a fine carriage, pulled by 4 matching bay horses. It was the kind of rig you saw in magazines from back east, not in a dusty outpost like this. The carriage stopped in front of the bank. A driver in a crisp black uniform hopped down and opened the door. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than our whole clinic. A black Stetson sat on his head, and a silver watch chain glittered on his vest. He was handsome, but in a hard, severe way. A man used to getting what he wanted. But my eyes, my father's eyes, saw something else. As he reached for a leather portfolio, I saw it. A slight tremor in his left hand. Almost nothing. A flicker. But I saw it. Then he paused. A tiny, almost invisible wince of pain crossed his face. His right hand drifted toward his chest, just for a second, before he seemed to catch himself and straightened up, all commanding presence once more. My breath hitched in my throat. The tremor, the momentary chest pain, the subtle shortness of breath. They were the exact same signs Mr. Jameson had shown in the weeks before he died. "You've been staring at that gentleman for quite some time, Miss Winters." I jumped, nearly dropping my broom. Mrs. Chen, the seamstress, was standing beside me, a basket of fabric scraps on her hip. I wasn't staring," I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. She gave me a knowing smile. "That's Nathan Thornhill. Owns the biggest cattle ranch in 3 territories. They say he's richer than the governor himself." She leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "And a widower. Lost his wife in childbirth years ago. No children." I barely heard her gossip. My eyes were locked on Nathan Thornhill as he disappeared into the bank. My mind was racing. If I was right, if it was the same heart condition that had taken Mr. Jameson, then this powerful, wealthy man was in mortal danger. But what could I do? Walk up to him and tell him he was dying? A man like that? He'd laugh in my face. The whole town would call me a fool. Or worse, a liar. She's just the girl who sweeps the clinic. The clinic door opened behind me. "Abigail, I need those splints for young Billy Turner." Broke his arm falling out of the hayloft again. It was Doc Lawrence. His voice was gruff, but I was grateful for the distraction. I hurried inside, but my thoughts wouldn't leave Nathan Thornhill alone. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just the heat, the long journey. But I knew I wasn't wrong. I had my father's gift. A curse, really. The curse of seeing what others missed, and the cowardice to do nothing about it. The hours dragged on. The heat in the clinic became stifling. Just after noon, as I was cleaning up after setting Billy Turner's arm, the door opened again. A blast of hot air rolled in, and with it, the imposing figure of Nathan Thornhill. Up close, he was even more intimidating. But I saw the fine sheen of sweat on his brow that had nothing to do with the temperature. I saw the faint pallor under his sun-darkened skin. I saw the careful, rigid way he held his body, as if trying to keep something painful locked inside. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "I'm looking for the doctor." My own voice came out as a whisper. "Dr. Lawrence is out on a call. The Sullivans' youngest has the fever again." He frowned. "Any idea when he'll return?" "Not until evening, sir." I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribs. The promise I made to myself in the dark echoed in my ears. Never again. Is there something I can help you with?" The words hung in the air. He looked at me, his dark eyes assessing, a flicker of amusement in them. "Unless you're hiding a medical degree beneath that apron, Miss Winters. Abigail Winters. I'm Dr. Lawrence's assistant." "His assistant," he repeated, his eyebrow arching with skepticism. "And what does that entail exactly?" "I keep the clinic clean, I organize supplies, and I prepare medications according to Dr. Lawrence's instructions." I took a shaky breath. "And I observe. I've learned a great deal in 3 years." "I'm sure you have," he said, his tone making it clear he didn't believe a word of it. "Well, Miss Winters, please tell the doctor that Nathan Thornhill called. I'll return tomorrow." He turned to go. This was it. My moment. Let him walk away, and another man's death could be on my hands. As he turned, I saw it again, that tiny wince of pain. His hand, flying to his chest in a gesture he tried to disguise as adjusting his vest. The words tumbled out of me before I could stop them. "Mr. Thornhill, are you experiencing chest pain?" He froze. He turned back slowly, his eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Excuse me?" My courage faltered. The room felt small, airless, but I saw Mr. Jameson's face, his lips turning blue. "Your left hand trembled when you first arrived," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "You seem short of breath, even though you're moving slowly, and you've pressed your hand to your chest twice now, in obvious discomfort." I took one more breath, a deep one. "Those are signs of a potential heart condition." He stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Then his expression hardened into a mask of cold fury. "You've been watching me quite closely, it seems." "I notice things," I whispered, "especially things related to illness. It's what I do." "Is it now?" He took a step closer, his tall frame looming over me. He was trying to intimidate me, to put me back in my place. "And what medical school granted you the authority to diagnose me, Miss Winters?" I shrank back. "None, sir, but nothing. You're overstepping, young lady. I am in perfect health." As if to mock his own words, a sudden sharp spasm of pain shot through him. His face went white. He grabbed the edge of the examination table to keep from falling. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. My fear vanished, replaced by pure instinct. I took his arm and guided him toward the examination chair. "Please, sit down. The symptoms are worse when you're agitated." To my shock, he didn't resist. He sank into the chair, his arrogance washed away by a wave of pain. I grabbed Doc Lawrence's stethoscope from the desk. My hands were steady now. I held it out to him. "I understand if you don't trust me to examine you," I said quietly. "But perhaps you could listen for yourself. Place the end here." I pointed to the left side of his chest. "A healthy heartbeat is regular, strong, like a drum. If you hear it skipping or fluttering, that's a problem." He looked at the stethoscope, then at me. Skepticism warred with a new flicker of fear in his eyes. He took it. He placed it against his chest. I watched his face as he listened. I saw the moment his certainty cracked, the faint furrow of his brow, the tightening of his jaw. What am I supposed to be hearing?" he asked, his voice strained. "May I?" I held out my hand. He hesitated for a long second, then handed it back. I moved carefully, professionally. I placed the cold metal disc against his chest, just below his starched white shirt. I closed my eyes and listened. It was there, just as I'd suspected. Thump, 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 thump. It was irregular, frighteningly so. A heart under immense strain, a heart that was failing. I pulled the stethoscope away, suddenly aware of how close we were. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Your heart is beating irregularly, Mr. Thornhill," I said, my voice low and even. "The pattern suggests cardiac insufficiency. It's very similar to what Mr. Jameson experienced before his heart failed completely." His head snapped up. "Jameson? The rancher who died 2 weeks ago?" "Yes, he showed many of the same symptoms you are displaying right now." His expression darkened. "So you're telling me I'm dying?" "Not necessarily," I said quickly. "With rest, the right medication, and avoiding stress, the condition can be managed. But if you ignore it—" I let the sentence hang in the air between us. He stared at me, his sharp eyes searching my face. "You seem very certain, Miss Winters, for someone with no formal training." "I learned from Dr. Lawrence for 3 years," I said, a strange new confidence blooming in my chest. "And before that, I learned from my father. He was a physician, too." Something in his face changed, a flicker of something I couldn't read. "Your father? What was his name?" A knot of old pain and pride tightened in my stomach. "Dr. Thomas Winters. He practiced in Santa Fe." The name hit him like a physical blow. Nathan Thornhill went completely still. The color drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, pale shade. His gaze was no longer assessing. It was piercing, filled with a sudden, terrible intensity. "Thomas Winters," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "The same Dr. Winters who was accused of medical negligence in the death of Elizabeth Thornhill 6 years ago?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping, each word a chip of ice. "The same Dr. Winters who took his own life, rather than face the consequences?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The air rushed out of my lungs. "How did you—" "Elizabeth was my sister, Miss Winters." His words struck me harder than any fist. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. All the blood in my body felt like it had rushed to my head. My sister. Her death was the scandal that had shattered my world. It was the accusation that had turned my brilliant, honorable father into a pariah. It was the reason he was dead. And this man whose life I was trying to save, was her brother. That's not true," I stammered. "You don't understand what happened." "Oh, I understand perfectly," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He pushed himself to his feet, the pain in his chest forgotten in the face of this shocking revelation. "I understand that my sister died under your father's care. A death that could have been prevented." He took a step toward me, and I find it fascinating that the daughter of Thomas Winters is now trying to diagnose me with a fatal heart condition. It's almost poetic, don't you think? "Please, Mr. Thornhill, your heart—" "My heart is no concern of yours," he cut me off, snatching his hat from the desk. "I'll wait for the real doctor." He strode toward the door, his back rigid with anger. But he didn't make it. Another spasm, more violent than the last, seized him. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. He stumbled, his powerful frame suddenly fragile, one hand clutching his chest as the other groped for something to hold on to. I was at his side in an instant, my shock replaced by the urgent need to keep him alive. I half-carried, half-dragged him back to the chair. "Sit down before you fall," I commanded, my voice sharp. "Whatever you think of my father, your heart is in distress. That is a medical fact, not a personal opinion." He collapsed into the chair, his breathing a painful, wheezing sound. For several long minutes, that was the only sound in the room. His fight for air, my own hammering pulse. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained. "In my saddlebag, a small silver case. Get it." I ran outside to his horse, my hands fumbling with the leather straps. I found the ornate case and brought it back. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, were several small white pills. "One, under the tongue," he gasped. I helped him place the tiny pill under his tongue. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Slowly, agonizingly, his breathing began to ease. A little color seeped back into his face. "Nitroglycerin," I murmured, recognizing the medication from my father's books. The pieces clicked into place. "You already knew," I said, my voice flat with realization. "You already knew about your heart condition." He opened his eyes. They were filled with exhaustion and a reluctant resignation. "For 2 years, a specialist in San Francisco diagnosed me. He prescribed these for episodes." "Then why?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why did you deny it? Why did you let me think I was crazy?" A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Because weakness is a luxury men in my position cannot afford, Miss Winters. And because the last thing I ever expected was to have my own mortality pointed out to me by the daughter of the man I hold responsible for my sister's death." "My father was not responsible," I said, a sudden fire in my voice. It felt like someone else was speaking, someone brave. The accusation was a lie. He was a scapegoat. The official inquiry said otherwise. The inquiry was wrong. I met his gaze, unflinching. "He diagnosed your sister correctly. Typhoid fever. It was the consulting physician, a man named Dr. Clayton, who overruled him. He said it was malaria and administered a treatment that killed her." He stared at me, his expression hardening again. "You expect me to believe your version of events? Based on what?" "Based on the truth." I didn't wait for his permission. I walked to the small room in the back, my room, and retrieved the one thing I had left of my father, his journal. I brought it back and opened it to the pages I had read 1,000 times, the pages that detailed Elizabeth Thornhill's case, her symptoms, my father's diagnosis, his recommended treatment, and at the end, the damning entry, overruled by Dr. Richard Clayton. Prescribed massive doses of quinine. Patient's fever spiked. Heart failed. I fear the treatment, not the illness, was the cause of death. I placed the open journal in Nathan Thornhill's lap. He read it in complete silence. The only sound was the frantic ticking of the clock on the wall, counting down the seconds of his life. When he finally looked up, something in his eyes had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling confusion. This proves nothing," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "It's just his word against Dr. Clayton's." "Perhaps," I admitted, "but ask yourself this. If my father made a fatal error, why would he document it so clearly? And if he was guilty, why would I, his daughter, be here? Working in a medical clinic? Trying to prevent the very kind of tragedy that supposedly drove him to suicide?" The speech left me breathless. It was more than I had said to anyone in years. Nathan Thornhill looked from the journal to my face and back again. A long moment passed. "You're not what I expected, Abigail Winters." "Neither are you, Mr. Thornhill," I replied. "Now, are you going to let me help you? Or are you going to wait for Dr. Lawrence while the stress of this conversation triggers another attack?" A reluctant smile, the first I'd seen, touched his lips. "You don't mince words when you finally decide to speak them, do you?" He shook his head slowly. "My father once said the same thing to me." I blinked. You knew my father? Personally?" "I met him during Elizabeth's illness." His expression softened. "He wasn't what I was led to believe." He paused, as if weighing his next words. "The truth is, Miss Winters, I didn't come to Copper Creek just for a land deal." He looked directly at me, his gaze intense. "I came here looking for you." The world stopped. For me? My mind reeled. Why? Why would this powerful man, the brother of the woman my father was blamed for killing, be looking for me? "For the last 6 years," he said, his voice low and serious, "I've been investigating my sister's death, and everything I've uncovered suggests that your father was telling the truth, that he was wrongfully accused." My knees felt weak. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. I've been trying to find you for 3 years, he continued. Ever since I learned of your existence. I needed to hear your side of the story. I needed to know if you had any evidence, anything that could help me prove it. But you acted as if you still blamed him, I whispered, confused. I needed to see how you would react, he admitted. If you would defend him. How you would defend him. He gestured to the journal in his lap. I didn't expect proof this concrete, but I suspected something like it might exist. Your father struck me as a meticulous man. A wave of questions washed over me. If you suspected he was innocent, why didn't you say something at the inquiry? Your family had influence. You could have saved him. A shadow passed over his face. By the time my doubts became serious, it was too late. Your father was already gone. And you had vanished. Finding you was not easy, Miss Winters. You covered your tracks well. I wasn't hiding, I said softly. I was surviving. No one in Santa Fe would hire the daughter of a disgraced doctor. I looked down at my hands, calloused from sweeping and scrubbing. Doc Lawrence was the only one who would take me in. He had studied under my father once and respected his work. And you found a way to continue that work, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. You diagnosed me correctly, even when I tried to hide it. That's impressive. My cheeks warmed. Thank you. But that doesn't change the fact that you need to rest. Your heart won't wait for you to uncover old conspiracies. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Perhaps not, but I have a meeting tomorrow, a land purchase. The deal is worth $50,000. What good is $50,000 if you're dead, Mr. Thornhill? The bluntness of the question startled him. Then he let out a short, surprised laugh. You really are Thomas Winters's daughter. His words, meant as a compliment, sent a fresh chill down my spine. The connection between us, between our families, was a tangled, dangerous knot. All right, Miss Winters, he said, finally relenting. What do you suggest? Rest. Right here. Avoid all exertion. I'll prepare a tincture of foxglove to strengthen your heart and some willow bark tea to thin your blood. I hesitated. And you must postpone that meeting. I can't, he said firmly. The man I'm meeting, James Morrison, is leaving on the evening train tomorrow. This deal is not just about money. The land contains the watershed for my entire ranch. If I lose it, I could lose everything. I saw the stubborn set of his jaw. Arguing would only agitate him further. Then a compromise, I said. Postpone it until the afternoon. Rest here until then. Let the medicine work. He considered it for a moment, then nodded. A reasonable compromise, but I need to send word to my associates. They're waiting for me. I can do that, I offered. Where are they? The Silver Dollar Hotel, Richard Clayton and 2 others. The name landed like a punch to my gut. Richard Clayton, the man who had destroyed my father, the man who had caused his sister's death. Thornhill must have seen the shock on my face. What is it? Do you know him? Only by reputation, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. He's the doctor who overruled my father. Thornhill's expression darkened. Yes. After Elizabeth's death, Clayton left medicine for business. He's been my partner for the last 5 years. My mind couldn't process it. Your partner? You work with him? The man you suspect of framing your own father and causing your sister's death? Business and personal matters are best kept separate, Miss Winters, he said, his voice sharp and dismissive. It was a wall, and I was not invited past it. Now the message. Tell Clayton I've been delayed by a minor issue. We'll meet at the bank tomorrow at noon. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. How could he sit there, knowing what Clayton had done, and still conduct business with him? But I saw the look in his eyes. The conversation was over. Very well, Mr. Thornhill, I said, my voice tight. I'll deliver your message. As I turned to leave, he called out to me, "Miss Winters." I looked back. His expression was softer now, the wall gone. "Thank you. It seems I may have misjudged you." "Perhaps we've both been too quick to judge," I replied. And as I walked out into the blistering sun, I had a terrible feeling that the danger to Nathan Thornhill wasn't just coming from inside his own chest. It was waiting for him at the Silver Dollar Hotel. The lobby of the Silver Dollar was filled with cigar smoke and the low murmur of men talking about money and land. They stopped and stared as I walked in, a plain girl in a simple dress, clearly out of her element. I found the hotel restaurant, and there he was, Richard Clayton. He was older now, his hair more silver than black, but he had the same arrogant posture I remembered from the inquiry. He sat with two other men, a tall, nervous-looking one, and a shorter, heavier one with shifty eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached their table. "Excuse me, Dr. Clayton." He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Yes? What is it, girl?" "I have a message from Mr. Thornhill," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's been delayed by a minor matter. He will meet you at the bank tomorrow at noon." Clayton's eyes narrowed. He studied me, a flicker of something unpleasant in his gaze. "Delayed? What sort of matter?" The short, heavy man leaned forward. "He looked unwell when he arrived. Is he ill?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Thornhill's private business," I said, parroting his own earlier dismissal of me. "You can and you will," Clayton snapped, his voice hard. "I'm his partner. If something is wrong with him, I have a right to know." "He's resting at the clinic," I said, deciding a partial truth was better than a lie. "As a precaution." Clayton snorted. "Resting? At that backwater clinic with that old sawbones Lawrence? If he needed a doctor, he should have come to me." The arrogance of it, the hypocrisy, made something snap inside me. "You haven't practiced medicine in years," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. "You seem remarkably well informed for a girl who sweeps floors, and remarkably impertinent." He stared at me, his eyes boring into mine. "Wait a minute. I know you. You have your father's eyes." My blood ran cold. "Thomas Winters," he breathed, the name a curse on his lips. "You're his daughter." The two other men at the table stopped eating. The entire world seemed to shrink down to the space between me and this monster. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, turning to flee. "Oh, I think you do," he called after me, his voice laced with venom. "You tell Thornhill I'll be by the clinic later to check on my partner's health, personally." I didn't stop running until I was back in the safety of the clinic. Thornhill was still in the chair, looking slightly better. "Did you deliver the message?" he asked. I couldn't form the words. I just nodded, my body trembling. "What's wrong?" he asked, seeing my distress. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "He knows who I am," I choked out. "Clayton." He recognized me. Thornhill sat up straight, his face suddenly grim. "What did he say?" He said he's coming here. To check on you. Personally." The air in the room grew thick with unspoken history. The man who had destroyed my father was coming here. To the room where his business partner, the man he likely cheated, was being treated by the daughter of the man he framed. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a confrontation waiting to happen. And I was standing right in the middle of it. For the next hour, a tense silence hung over the clinic. Thornhill sat brooding in the chair, while I busied myself preparing the foxglove tincture, my hands moving on their own while my mind raced. Clayton was coming. Why? Was it genuine concern for his partner? I doubted it. A man like Clayton didn't feel concern. He felt opportunity. He saw weakness and calculated how to exploit it. I glanced over at Thornhill. He was staring into space, his jaw tight. Why are you still in business with him? I asked, the question breaking the silence. If you suspect he framed my father, that he's responsible for your sister's death. Why? He was quiet for a long time. Leverage, he finally said, his voice low. Over the past few years, I've been buying up his debts, acquiring his assets under different names. This land deal tomorrow, it's the final piece. If it goes through, I'll control everything. I'll have him completely ruined. And then, when he has nothing left, I'm going to present him with my evidence and destroy what's left of his name. It was a cold, calculated plan for revenge. It was ruthless, and it was incredibly dangerous. He's not a man to be underestimated, I warned. He's not going to let you ruin him without a fight. I'm aware of that, Thornhill said grimly. Just then the clinic door swung open. Richard Clayton filled the doorway, a black leather medical bag in his hand. He wasn't alone. The short, heavy man with the shifty eyes, whose name I learned was Barrow, stood just behind him. Clayton's eyes swept the room, landing on me with a look of pure contempt before settling on Thornhill. Nathan, he said, his voice smooth as oil. I was so worried when I heard you were unwell. I thought I'd bring my old kit and see if I can't be of some service. That's not necessary, Richard, Thornhill said, his tone like ice. Miss Winters has things well in hand. Clayton chuckled, a nasty, condescending sound. Miss Winters? Don't you mean the disgraced daughter of the incompetent fool who killed your sister? Her only qualification is mopping floors. I hardly think she's fit to treat a common cold, let alone a man in your delicate condition. He stepped further into the room, placing his bag on the examination table with a soft thud. Now, let's have a look at you. Barrow, wait outside and make sure we're not disturbed. Barrow nodded and stepped back out, pulling the door closed behind him. We were trapped. I'm fine, Richard, Thornhill insisted, though a sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. The stress was getting to him. Nonsense. Clayton opened his bag, revealing rows of vials and gleaming instruments. Just a simple examination, for my own peace of mind. He pulled out a syringe and a small, dark bottle. I have just the thing, a tonic, to strengthen the heart and calm the nerves. My eyes fixed on the bottle. I didn't recognize the label. A cold dread snaked its way up my spine. What is that? I asked, my voice sharp. Clayton ignored me. He began to fill the syringe, his movements practiced and steady. This will have you feeling right as rain in no time, Nathan, ready for our big day tomorrow. I don't want it, Thornhill said, his voice strained. He tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness forced him back into the chair. Don't be difficult, Nathan, Clayton said, his voice losing its friendly edge. He tapped the syringe, flicking a tiny bubble of air from the tip. Doctor's orders. He was going to inject him, right here, in front of me. My father's words echoed in my head. Speak the truth of what one has seen. I saw a predator cornering his prey. I saw a man about to administer a substance that was not a tonic. I didn't know what was in that syringe, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was meant to harm, not heal. My mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to stop him. Arguing was useless. He wouldn't listen to me. Thornhill was too weak to fight back. Then my eyes landed on the small tray on the desk beside me. On it was the foxglove tincture I had prepared for Thornhill, and the cup of willow bark tea I had brewed. Next to it sat a bottle of laudanum, a powerful opiate used for pain. In high doses, it could slow the heart to a stop. An idea, a terrible, risky idea, sparked in my mind. As Clayton advanced on Thornhill with the syringe, I moved. I grabbed the cup of willow bark tea and tripped, stumbling forward and splashing the dark liquid all over the front of Clayton's expensive suit coat. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I cried, feigning clumsiness. Clayton swore, jumping back. "You clumsy little fool! Look what you've done!" He was distracted. It was all I needed. While he was busy dabbing at his jacket with a handkerchief, his back momentarily turned, I acted. With lightning speed, I picked up the small bottle of laudanum. Clayton had left his own dark bottle, the one he'd drawn from, uncapped on the table next to his bag. In one swift, fluid motion, I swapped them. I placed the laudanum bottle where his had been, and slipped his bottle into the pocket of my apron. It took less than 2 seconds. When he turned back around, his face a mask of fury, I was on my knees, mopping up the spilled tea with a rag, my expression one of pure, terrified apology. "Get out of my way," he snarled, pushing past me. He picked up the syringe again, but his focus was broken. He was angry and flustered. He approached Thornhill, who was watching the scene with wide, confused eyes. "Now, where were we?" Clayton said, trying to regain his composure. He held the syringe up to the light. It was still full. Yes. Your tonic." This was the moment of truth. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. Had he noticed the switch? But he was too arrogant, too sure of himself. He would never imagine that me, the little cleaning girl, would dare to interfere with his plans. He plunged the needle into a small vial of what I assumed was sterile water to slightly dilute the dose, a common practice. He didn't draw from the bottle again. My bluff had worked. No, wait. He wasn't diluting it. He was adding something. He turned his back to me slightly, but I saw him take another, smaller vial from his vest pocket. A clear liquid. He added a few drops to the syringe. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just poisoning Thornhill. He was using a custom mixture. What had I done? My plan was useless. The poison was already in the syringe. I had to do something else. "Stop!" The word exploded out of me. Clayton froze, the needle hovering over Thornhill's arm. He turned to me, his eyes filled with pure venom. "What did you say?" "That tonic," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "It contains aconite, doesn't it? Wolfsbane." Both men stared at me. Thornhill with confusion, Clayton with genuine murderous shock. I was guessing. A wild shot in the dark based on a passage I'd read in one of my father's more obscure toxicology books. A poison that mimicked the symptoms of heart failure. Aconite. Clayton's face told me I'd hit the mark. It's a poison that causes the heart to become erratic before stopping completely, I continued, the words flowing as if from a textbook. It would look just like his existing condition had suddenly worsened. No one would ever suspect. "You're insane," Clayton hissed, but he took a step back from Thornhill. "Am I?" I looked at Thornhill, my voice pleading. "Don't let him inject you. Please, look at his bag. Ask him why a businessman carries a full medical kit with him. Ask him what's in that syringe." Thornhill looked from my desperate face to Clayton's furious one. The gears were turning in his mind. The suspicion he'd held for years was finally connecting with the scene playing out in front of him. "Richard," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What's in the syringe?" "It's a simple vitamin tonic, Nathan. The girl is hysterical." Clayton blustered. "Then inject yourself with it," I challenged. "If it's just a tonic, prove it. Show us how harmless it is." A deadly silence fell over the room. Clayton looked at the syringe in his hand. He looked at me and at Thornhill, whose expression had hardened into one of cold certainty. He was cornered. He knew it. With a snarl, he threw the syringe to the floor, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. "You'll regret this," he spat at me. "Both of you." He turned and stormed toward the door, but Thornhill, moving with a sudden burst of adrenaline, was faster. He blocked the exit. "It was you, wasn't it?" Thornhill's voice was filled with a grief and rage that had been simmering for 6 long years. "You killed Elizabeth. You changed the diagnosis. You gave her the wrong medicine." Clayton laughed, a chilling, unhinged sound. "She was a fool, just like her brother. She found out I was embezzling from her father's estate. She was going to expose me." He looked Thornhill dead in the eye. So I silenced her. And your father, the good Dr. Winters, he was the perfect person to blame. So self-righteous, so meticulous in his notes. It was easy to make him look like a guilt-ridden failure who took the coward's way out. A strangled cry escaped my lips. He was admitting it. All of it. And you, Clayton sneered, turning his gaze on me. He didn't even kill himself. Your father was a fighter. He was starting to piece things together, planning to go to the authorities. I couldn't have that. The world tilted on its axis. He didn't... I couldn't finish the sentence. Of course not, Clayton said with a dismissive wave of his hand. A pillow over the face in the dead of night, a forged note. It was remarkably simple. Just as it would have been with you, Nathan. A tragic heart failure, the night before you were set to ruin me. Who would have questioned it? Thornhill didn't say a word. His face was a mask of stone. With a speed that belied his condition, he lunged forward and landed a single powerful punch that sent Clayton sprawling to the floor, unconscious. Just as Clayton's associate Barrow burst through the door, drawn by the noise, Doc Lawrence appeared behind him, holding a shotgun, and behind him stood the town sheriff. Heard there was some trouble, the sheriff drawled, taking in the scene. It turned out, Doc Lawrence had grown suspicious after my nervous return from the hotel. He'd seen Clayton and his man heading toward the clinic and had decided to fetch the law, just in case. My father hadn't been a coward. He'd been a hero. He'd been murdered. The revelation washed over me, a wave of grief and vindication so powerful I thought I would collapse. Nathan reached out and steadied me, his hand on my arm. Our eyes met, and in that moment, the ghosts of our pasts, the sister and the father that connected and divided us, finally seemed to find some peace. The aftermath was a blur. Clayton and Barrow were taken into custody. The bottle of poison I had slipped into my apron was handed over as evidence. The sheriff found the second vial, the aconite, in Clayton's vest pocket. With my testimony, and Thornhill's, and the damning evidence in my father's journal, the truth that had been buried for 6 years finally came to light. Nathan Thornhill did not lose his ranch. The land deal went through, securing his family's legacy for generations. His heart, with rest and proper care, my care, slowly began to heal. The specialist in San Francisco later confirmed that a slow-acting cumulative poison had been exacerbating his condition for months, likely administered by Clayton through shared meals and drinks. My intervention had saved his life in more ways than one. My father's name was cleared. The Santa Fe newspaper printed a full retraction, hailing Dr. Thomas Winters as a hero who was tragically silenced before he could expose a killer. And me? I was no longer just the girl who sweeps the clinic. I was Abigail Winters, the woman who had faced down a murderer and won. The woman who had found her voice when it mattered most. Doc Lawrence, with a proud smile, officially named me his partner in the clinic, and he began the process of getting my training formally recognized. The people of Copper Creek, who once whispered about the strange, quiet girl, now greeted me with respect. They called me Doc Abigail. Nathan stayed in Copper Creek while things were sorted out. He was a constant presence at the clinic, first as a patient, and then as something more. We talked for hours about my father, about his sister, about the future. We were two broken people, haunted by the same man, who had found a way to heal each other. One evening, as the sun set, painting the dusty street in shades of orange and purple, we stood on the clinic porch. He said, "I have my father's eyes," I said quietly. Nathan took my hand. His was warm and strong. "You do," he said. "You have his intelligence, too, and his courage." He squeezed my hand gently. "Your father would be so proud of you, Abigail." Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time in a long, long time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had found my voice, my purpose, and my place. I would spend the rest of my life honoring my father's legacy, not by being silent, but by speaking the truth, no matter who wanted to hear it. My name is Abigail Winters, and this is the story of how I stopped being a ghost and learned to live. If you believe that one voice can make a difference, and that the truth is always worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.